and welcome back to Final Friday, where I have a cold, but no matter, I'll still be going through my records in alphabetical order like a big nerd and talking about what I love. Today's album was initially trashed by critics, but has come to achieve a sort of cult classic status. It features the likes of Jerry Garcia, Phil Lesh of the Grateful Dead, Grace Slick, Paul Kantner from Jefferson Airplane, Greg Rowley of Santana, later Journey, one Joni Mitchell, and of course Graham Nash and Neil Young. And this is my favourite nugget of information about this album. Vatican City's L'Osservatore Romano gave this album the #2 spot in their top 10 pop albums of all time, second only to Revolver by the Beatles. So this is a good one. This is also the first album that I have bought specifically so that I could cover it for Vinyl Friday. It is the last album in the David Crosby verse for now, and it is 1971's If I Could Only Remember My Name. Let's have a listen to what's on this album.
An attraction in the rain. Oh no.
But today we'll be listening to Laughing. At this point in David Crosby's life, his girlfriend had just died.
Killed in a car crash. I had no way to deal with it. And the only place that I could exist, really, was in the studio. When we finished Deja Vu, I just stayed in the studio.
Apparently, he'd sort of wake up in the morning, drag himself out of bed, basically try and get through the day, and then get to the studio in the evening and work through the night. It was a real time of extremes for him. In a recent interview with Rolling Stone, he said of this period, "I'm gonna do my best David Crosby impersonation. Here I am. I've been punched in the mouth, knocked my teeth out, and I'm on the ground, and then somebody ran me over with a tractor. In the same 24 hours, I'm in fucking heaven. I'm making music that I fucking love, and I believe in, and that really moves me. I had the maximum amount of happiness and the maximum amount of sadness at the same time." It really felt like his friends, these other really prominent California musicians who were arguably in their prime, and probably busy with other projects. It feels like they all banded together, all rallied around this man who was deeply heartbroken and just came in to support their friend and make music with him.
Particularly Garcia, who would come every night.
That vibe of love and graciousness, generosity, really comes through in the music. It feels like a community effort. Editor Nancy here. I have a lovely little anecdote.
Graham's there, Neil's there. I'm fooling with it. Neil, starts playing along. Graham starts singing with it. We get to the end and we're like, wow, that was fun. Graham says, "I think that's the beginning of your album. He's a pretty smart fella." But I said, bullshit. They said, "Oh yeah, it is. Give us the tape." They overdubbed and they brought me back the tape and they said, "Now it's the beginning of your record, right?"
I think you can really see that in the design of the jacket as well. So obviously he's on the front and the back, but inside is a sort of photo album of all of the people who are involved. Indeed, it looks like it actually is a photo album. There are little pockets that each of the photos slots into, so it is a family album, and it is also a family album. It's his chosen family. I mean, look at this personnel though. You've got here's Mickey Hart, here's Neil Young, there's Graham Nash reading a newspaper. That's his brother Ethan Crosby. Grace Slick, Jefferson Airplane, and of course the queen herself, Joni Mitchell. Today's song is the closer on side 1. I could have chosen any of the songs on this album because they're all great, but the reason that I've chosen this one is it's got a great story. You probably don't know this, but I'm a massive Beatles fan, and the story behind the songs really appealed to me. So over to our storytime correspondent. By some terrible coincidence, I am also sick. So David Crosby often says, "Aw, Sid, he's dead." I forgot. So David Crosby often spoke about how all of the Beatles were really friendly with him, but he really felt like he had the most connection with George. They had dinner together, and Just some nice bonding. Somebody mentioned in the comments weeks ago that David Crosby had turned George Harrison onto Indian music, which I didn't realize. Thank you to that person. It's actually relevant to this week's episode. So George meets up with David one day and he goes, "I've found this incredible guru. He's really got something. He's amazing." This was, of course, the Maharishi, who the Beatles went to spend time with at the beginning of 1968. George was telling David about this, and David's response was, "I did not want to come off like a snot to my new friend who I really respected hugely, so I didn't say anything. But I had it in my head, take it with a grain of salt." I wrote that song to tell him that. That first line, "I thought I met a man who said he knew a man who knew what was going on." David Crosby, George Harrison, Maharishi. The person I thought was the wisest I had met was a child laughing at the sun, and then I thought I could learn more from that child laughing at the sun than I could from anybody teaching. That refers, of course, to the last line of the song. "I thought I'd seen someone who seemed at last to know the truth. I was mistaken. It was only a child laughing at the sun." Lovely sentiment. So that's what the song's about. Back to you. I first came across this album when I was in my early 20s. I was living in a 1982 VW Combi van at the time, and on a whim decided to go to this incredible music festival on Vancouver Island. And Mr. Crosby here was one of the headline acts. His CDs were for sale after his gig. I, at the time, was a huge Crosby, Stills, Nash fan, but I wasn't aware that he had put out a solo album. Isn't that a marvelous time in your life where there is a world of music out there that you have yet to be exposed to and you don't even know it? Oh boy, here comes an anecdote within an anecdote. I was working for someone the other day. They had 2 teenage boys. A package came in the post for these boys, and it was the DVD for the Elton John biopic, Rocket Man. They were so excited about it. They were maybe like 13 and 14. And I said, "Oh, that's a great movie." And they said, "Have you heard of Elton John?" I said, "Yes, I've heard of Elton John. Great songwriter, really love his work." And they said, yeah, he's fantastic." And then they came back and they said, "Have you heard of Queen?" I said, "Yeah, I love Queen. Queen's great." Yeah, they're good. "What about the Beatles? Have you heard of the Beatles?" I just think it's such a magical time in your life. You have yet to be introduced to this enormous canon of great music that people can introduce you to or you can stumble upon on your own. The entire world of music is open to you. So I was sort of at the tail end of this when we went to this concert, and I bought this record. I listened to it maybe 10 or 11 times, and I had no idea how it went because the car was the only place where we could play the CD. In case you're not aware, a VW engine sounds like this. And I actually couldn't really hear the album over the engine. It wasn't until probably several months later that I put this album on and realized that I was in love with it. There are 2 things that I'd like to point out about this song today. The first is the chords. David Crosby is a master of sneaking complex chords into deceptively simple songs. This is a good example of one such song. This is the tuning we're in. If you take the verse, it just sounds like an extended jam on a D chord. That's not all that he's doing at all. He's playing all of these chords within that D. I think this will come over better on the keys. Piano correspondent? Why yes, regrettably, I also have the lurgy. I think I got it from the Storytime correspondent. Ah, look at that, I figured out the focus. If we listen to the verse, it sounds like he's just hammering away on this D chord. But what's actually happening is that while this bass note stays the same, the chords over the top are changing. It's way more complex than just this one. There's a whole lot more going on over the top. And then at the chorus, these beautiful backing vocals come in, and I'm not going to try to sing them because I can barely talk today, but they sound like this. So again, we've got this D in the bass. So he's sneaking these sort of complex harmonic textures into basically just these 2 notes, D and A. Don't tell anyone, sometimes I moonlight as a guitar correspondent. The tuning is almost entirely just those 2 notes. So if you keep that as your foundation, It gives you space to sort of move around and sneak some interesting nuance into your chords. Another thing I'd like to point out is that he's doing more of that word painting. I'll get Editor Nancy from last week to remind us what word painting is.
Editor Nancy here. Word painting, also known as tone painting or text painting, is the musical technique of composing music that reflects the literal meaning of the song's lyrics or story elements.
Back when I could speak. He's doing this sort of word painting thing in the chorus where he goes from this kind of heavy minor sound, and then at the end of the chorus, when we go to the word laughing, it goes from minor to major. Ha ha! How uplifting. We're still in focus. Back to you! The second thing I want to say about the song is that, much like the chords, David Crosby is sneaking in complexity, but somehow masterfully maintaining this ruse that it's a really simple song. He goes verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, all standard, but then there's a coda at the end of the song. Your verses are this part, da-da-da-da. Listen to my manly voice this week. I thought I met a man who thought he knew a man. And then these are the choruses here. So we have like 3 cycles of that first chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. And then he hits us with this wall of vocal. Just boom. It's like a tapestry. They're so interwoven that you can't, I'm mixing my metaphors here. You can't hear the individual threads, you can't hear the individual voices. Except for Joni's. We'll come to that. Everybody has banded together, like what I was saying in the beginning. It's everybody coming together and holding up David Crosby. This is what I mean about how it feels like a community effort, greater than the sum of its parts. Here's this tapestry, or a rug. Let's say it's a rug. This coda is a rug. When you look at a rug, you're not seeing the individual threads, it just looks like a rug. Great metaphor, Nancy. Hush. Here they come. And they open up. Kind of angelic. Very moving. Those high vocals at the end are unmistakably Joni Mitchell. So pretty. She has such a distinctive vibrato in her voice, it just jumps out. But you know, we're gonna get to dig into Joni, don't you worry. I suppose what I love about this song is that it's one of the best examples on the album of David Crosby's friends coming to help him out at a really rough time and making something beautiful together. It just feels like everyone embracing David Crosby when he's emotionally at rock bottom.
Music and my friends saved my life.
It's very heartwarming. Now, I think it's my turn to hijack the channel. I want to stand on my soapbox for a minute and talk about why I think music reviews are essentially meaningless. The Village Vanguard.
Editor's note here. Obviously feeling a bit brain foggy. I meant to say the Village Voice.
In 1971 gave this album a D- and called it a disgraceful performance. Rolling Stone magazine said, and I quote, "The playing is sloppy as hell. Crosby's singing here is even blander and more monotonously one-dimensional than Stills's on his solo album, not likely to go down in history." This book here is entitled 1001 Albums You Must Listen to Before You Die. Here is If I Could Only Remember My Name. And here's what they have to say about the song that we've just been listening to. Laughing is a masterpiece. Glistening acoustic guitars, wistful pedal steel, and luminous harmonies. I have to agree. Yeah, glistening, wistful, luminous, these are all words that I would use to describe the song as well. And while the Rolling Stone review thinks that his vocal delivery is boring and uninspiring, this particular reviewer says Crosby delivers a perfectly controlled, crystal clear vocal. As we were talking earlier about taking things with a grain of salt, take reviews with a grain of salt. They often change over time. They're the thoughts of one person. So much of what makes music meaningful to us is the memories and experiences that we can align with that music in our minds, in our souls. The points where experience and music intertwine. It's a huge part of how we relate to that music. Ultimately, whether or not music is good or bad is an entirely subjective question to which there is no correct answer. Subjectively, Rolling Stone was wrong. Right, before my voice gives out, that's it for me. If you would like to support any of my strange endeavors, like talking about my records, or making little cardboard miniatures for dioramas, watch this space. This will make sense in about 3 months' time. Or helping me cover my medical bills for injuries sustained while using hot glue guns to make said miniatures. I'll leave a link in the description to my Buy Me a Coffee page, where you're welcome to make a donation if you wish, but no pressure. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you here next week. Have a great weekend! How does he keep the soup out of his moustache? Oh, I did it again. He's dead. No longer with us.